Welcome back to the 107th online episode of Peace Time, hosted on Sunday mornings in the name of PeacePoint, with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, coming to you today from DIMC in Azusa, California. In the previous session, we completed the Inner Peace Education series, and today we'll move in a slightly different direction by looking at some old school tips and tricks that show some of the paradoxes of meditation, breaking halfway through for 30 minutes of meditation. So going back to a time in the late 80s and 90s when I was starting out on my own meditation journey in Thailand, we used to get 2 weeks away from our normal duties in the temple to go and do some meditation up in the mountains of the north of Thailand, which is all very nice, mostly up in the forest preserves and national parks, where they would have some cabins where people could go and meditate and so on. And in those days, we were very privileged to get to go along with the main teachers in our tradition as well, because they were a lot more accessible in those days. Yeah. And no one really thought very much about systematizing our meditation practice or putting things down in writing or anything like that. It was just like a personal apprenticeship where we tried to learn from the people more experienced than us in their practice. Little by little, our teacher in Thailand, who most of you will not know personally, the Venerable Dhammajayo, or Phra Dhammajayo as we call him, would start making us memorize various tips and tricks to help us with our meditation practice, covering most of the things which tended to hold people back, where people were getting their meditation technique wrong, with the idea that if we could only reach the point where we ignited our meditation progress, then the rest would fall into place. But sometimes getting to base camp in our meditation takes a little bit of basic knowledge on our part. So I have referred to this knowledge as old school because it goes back 30 or 40 years. And since more recently, recommendations for meditation have become increasingly less structured. For what it's worth, I think it's good to remind everyone of the old advice too, just to give you a comparison with the latest tips and tricks that you might hear, for example, on the full moon transmissions from the Venerables Daniel and Jackie. So going back to the old stuff, Venerable Dhammajayo came up with a list of 10 pieces of advice, so a nice round number, right? If anyone is interested to read up more on these, they actually come from a book which was written back in the day called Start Meditation Today. So here we go with number 1. Cherish the center of the body more dearly than life itself. This advice may sound a little bit extreme, but what it really means is that whatever you're doing, not just during your meditation, but whatever activities you're doing during the day, in between your sessions of meditation, you should still maintain your awareness at the center of your body, right? It's not that you're going to bump into things because you're paying more attention to the center of your body than you are to your surroundings. Because it's your mind which focuses at your center rather than your eyesight, right? So it recommends staying centered whatever you're doing, no matter what the activity is. For some activities it's easier than others, but generally the sort of no-brainer activities where you're not thinking too much or using your visual faculties too much are activities where you can also easily maintain your mind in some sort of peacefulness at the center of yourself. Because your mind is not pulled away to those other things around you, then the sense of peace that you had built up in your meditation will tend to stay with you for longer, right? And it should also bring you courage in life, because for as long as the mind stays at the center of the body, no sense of fear can creep in. I used to be a person who was afraid of heights, for example. But the moment I started to practice this meditation on the center, I could go up in high places, and if I remained centered, then actually I didn't suffer from any of the usual feelings of vertigo, which was a pleasant surprise. But for this first meditation hack, they have used a language that is a little bit more dramatic. So number 2 is to be constantly on the alert to your own blind spots that hinder the mind from coming to a standstill. And once you discover such blind spots, rectify them as best you can. So, do you know what the mind coming to a standstill means? You don't? So it's a sort of shorthand for saying that the thoughts in your mind have come to a standstill, or you've reached a point where all the thoughts, which are normally very busy in your mind, have started to get less and less, to the point that they've eventually stopped completely. Yes, it can happen. You become a thoughtless person. Yeah. Usually no one likes to appear thoughtless, but for meditation, it's actually a very powerful state, because, strangely enough, once you stop thinking, all the good stuff beneath the surface of the thoughts can come to the fore. And there are a lot more interesting things there, like our intuition, or gut feelings, or creative impulses, to which we can then have access the moment the thoughts move over and give them some space. So once the thoughts come to a standstill, then all the good stuff can happen. So as we are trying to set up conditions by which a standstill can take place in our meditation, we need to be observant about minimizing the things that will stir up the thoughts all over again. We need to be aware of these sort of things. In this way, we'll be able to maintain our mind in that sweet spot of zero thoughts for longer and longer periods of time. Make sense? So, moving on to number 3. Let the mind come to a standstill. So we have a standstill again, to a stop, with uninterfering observation, with contentment, nothing more, nothing less. So this identifies the sort of effort required to maintain the mind in that grade A state, where there's no more thoughts coming up anymore, but your mind feels content to remain in that space which you have created for yourself. It actually takes a very subtle sort of effort because it's such a delicate thing. It's a bit like a soap bubble which you're holding gingerly in your hands. You know you can't use any force or it'll pop. And sometimes our meditation experience is like that. It's so pristine and beautiful, and yet to maintain it you have to be really content and do nothing to interfere with it, even though you love it so much. Not to try to force it to be anything other than it already is. So this is the idea of not interfering. Not suddenly thinking, oh, this is good. Isn't this what the monk was promising? But not interfering, but just observing with the awareness, oh, it's here, and like, I'm not going to let on that I've even noticed. It's a very, very delicate sort of attention required to maintain that state once you get to it. Nothing more and nothing less means you're not adding anything more and you're not trying to detract from it, because limited by our conventional intelligence, generally we can't think of anything that's going to improve on it anyway. So we have to just give up trying. As for taking anything away, well, that speaks for itself too. Number 4, be content with whatever you experience, at least for the interim, in brackets. So, contentment. We hear a lot about that even in the latest buzzwords surrounding meditation. Some people are not happy with their meditation because they complain, the monk told me that I had to see a crystal ball in my meditation, but it wasn't a crystal ball, it was like a crystal horse. So I must be doing it wrong. When is it going to change into the crystal ball? I must be a failure. Or some people see things which actually frighten them in their meditation, so they think that's definitely wrong. So often when students ask me about their meditation experiences, I tend not to emphasize on what they saw, but I ask them to take a different perspective on the question, which is, and for the things that you saw, what was the quality of your visualization? Were you able to see the details of it? Were you able to maintain that inner picture for a long time? And they protest, what are you asking about? What I saw was terrible. It wasn't what I was supposed to see. And I explain the reason I'm asking is because it's not the thing itself that's important, but it's the quality of the seeing. And if your mind is improving in its condition, if it's achieving a better resolution in your mind, like you've upgraded the pixel depth of the sensors in your mind, then you'll find that whatever you see, and it doesn't matter what it is, becomes more realistic in your mind. So that reflects on the quality of the mind which you are bringing to the practice. And really, that is what we're most interested in. It doesn't matter what comes and goes in your mind. The quality of the seeing is something that tells you about the level of mastery in your meditation. So whatever comes up, be content with it. And that feeling of contentment is the quality that will allow the experience to advance further. For the interim means, okay, deep down we know this is not yet the ultimate experience, but we recognize it is starting to go in that direction. But the way to proceed is to be content with what we already have, because, ironically, contentment with what you have leads to further improvement. It's a sort of paradox of meditation, which we have to learn to live with. Number 5, observing without interfering will allow your inner experience to unfold in a natural way. So in the beginning, we tend to do something a little bit different, which is we put something in the mind to focus on. True? For those who have been following that sort of method in their meditation. So we conjure up an image, a picture of the sun, a picture of a crystal ball, a picture of whatever we find easier to imagine. So we put something in the mind, but from the moment it's there, we change the way we engage with the inner object. We're no longer keeping it there or forcing something or trying to manufacture something in the mind, but we stay with what we have and see where it's going to go on its own from there. So the way to do that is just to observe it, to stand back and see what's going on there. We are not going to try and make it do something or to be something different, but we're going to allow it to have the space to do what it wants to do on its own. And that's a sort of effort which is required for the meditation to unfold. It's a process we cannot hurry. We might think we're pretty savvy and we've got a lot of education under our belt, and we ought to know what's going on here and be able to hurry it along. But in fact, the mind has different plans. The best we can do is to set up the conditions by which the mind can unfold in its own time and in its own way, and that process will bring some benefits to us. However, we can't do it for the mind. Even though we may think the mind is ours and that we control the mind, but the mind has its own intelligence. So far, so good. So now that we've made it to the halfway point, and we're a little bit better equipped with some meditation hacks, let's settle ourselves for 30 minutes of meditation, which today is entitled Meditation for Addiction Recovery. So if you'd like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. To begin with, let's see if we can seat ourselves as comfortably as we can, shifting our weight so that our body feels well supported and comfortable. We gently allow our eyes to close, making sure our head, neck, and spine are straight. And we let our hands rest comfortably somewhere in our lap. And as we're becoming increasingly attuned to the sensation of our breath, moving in and out of our body, we might take a nice, deep, cleansing breath before breathing out fully and completely. Breathing in relaxation, exhaling any sense of judgment, feeling the expansion of our belly with each in-breath, and the way it subsides with each out-breath. And again breathing in, this time imagining that we are sending the refreshing energy of our breath to any part of the body that's tense or tight, and releasing the tension on the exhale so that we can feel our breath permeating all the tight, tense places, relaxing, loosening, and softening them, and then gathering up the tension and breathing it out, so that more and more we can feel safe, comfortable, relaxed, and at ease, watching the cleansing action of the breath with friendly but detached awareness. And if there are any unwelcome thoughts that come to mind, those too can be released with the out-breath. so that for the moment the mind is empty. Even if just for a split second it becomes a clear space where we feel blessed with stillness, and so that any other emotions still rattling around inside us can be noted, acknowledged, and expelled with the breath, so that our emotional state can be still and quiet, like a lake with no ripples. Even though meditation can be a powerful tool in overcoming challenges and facilitating change, since our body has become reliant on substances, it's up to each of us to help ourselves, and where necessary, ask others for help during our journey of recovery. It will also be up to each of us to set a schedule, to keep our readings up to date, to keep our rehabilitation on track, and avoid locations that might trigger us into relapse during the early days of our sobriety. So maintaining all these steps, marking our milestones, and maintaining our sobriety is critical to the success of our recovery. The more we break away from old dependencies and the people enabling them. Meanwhile, during this transition, it is important to have the humility to accept the help those we trust can offer us. And when we've put withdrawal behind us, we will feel like a new person, gaining true independence, which will stabilize our life and future. And so we reflect on the idea of meditating to deal with addiction. And although addiction may come in many different forms and may be different for everyone, it is a difficult but not insurmountable challenge if only we can do sufficient work on our mind. So we bring our awareness back within the space of the body, and this will allow us to find peace inside of suffering and light inside of darkness. So for this moment, just being here, now, letting go of the future, being right here in the present. We surrender our body, our mind, and our spirit to the higher energy of the universe, to the higher energy of the universe. We allow our awareness to go deeper, withdrawing from the external senses, listening to our body to discover what might lie beneath our craving, and to relax our state of mind still further. We might imagine ourselves transported to a landscape of our choice, a place of safety, a place that brings us joy, a forest, an ocean, a desert. We allow these surroundings to open up space for us to reconnect with whatever we regard as our higher power, even if it's the sense of deeper wisdom, stillness, or illumination that seems to come from inside us, allowing it to infuse our awareness within this sacred space, allowing the energy of courage, confidence, and strength to rise up within us, being present in this moment, choosing to love ourselves, to break away from our demons, to slip free of old habits, out of great compassion and immense gratitude for ourselves. As we free ourselves from dependence, from addiction, trusting in the path we have chosen to lead us to something different and better. And when we feel relaxed both in body and in mind, very gently, using no effort at all, we imagine that inside our body is just an empty space, with no organs or tissues, no muscles or bones, just a hollow space inside ourselves. If we like, we can imagine that our body is like a bubble, with thin transparent skin and hollow inside, with no organs or tissues, no muscles or bones. Now very slowly and gently, at a point in the middle of our body, we can conjure up the image of a bright shining sun, an image which we create with our mind's eye, maybe yellow or white in color, red or gold, it doesn't really matter. And if the picture of the sun doesn't come easily to us, then we can think of any other round, bright object which we find easier to imagine. We imagine our chosen object as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, with a light and gentle attention, as if we see it right down at the center of our body. Doesn't matter if it's not clear to us, we accept it however it may appear. And I cannot emphasize how important the word gentle is, because many people new to meditation use too much force when they come to meditate. They think if they do the equivalent of staring, or they use force in their meditation, it's going to help them to get results. But in fact, it only hinders the meditation from progressing. Therefore, we need to be very gentle in the way we place our attention at the center. If we find our mind wanders anywhere else, as soon as we realize, we just bring our mind back again to the center of the body as before. If our bright object disappears, we can always think of a new one. If the object changes in size, shape, color or form, we simply continue to observe at its center, observing always at the brightest spot at the center of the object. And before long, we'll start to find that the object will evolve and transform of its own accord, changing to become an object which is more perfect inside us, such as a bright clear sphere like a crystal ball inside ourselves. And if thoughts inundate the mind, we do our best to ignore them. Or we can make use of the silently repeated sound of a mantra, such as the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang. Hearing these words as if they seem to come like a silent music from the center of our body, for as long as it takes for the thoughts to become quieter and eventually disappear altogether. So we continue in this way, lightly and gently, applying our attention at the center of our body for a few moments more now in silence. So if we find our awareness wandering away onto other things, each time we realize, we just bring it back again. If our inner object disappears, we can conjure up a new one. If it changes, we just follow it in its new form. To be frank, meditation by itself can never serve as a substitute for a supportive group, exercise, or good nutrition. It won't take the place of working through the 12-step program. But it may help those of us in recovery with the 11th step of elevating our degree of conscious contact with a higher power that has our best interest at heart. However, following meditations like this one, once or twice a day, in conjunction with our process, will reinforce our motivation and increase the effectiveness of whatever we're already doing. Because in times of intense temptation, it will always be our inner strength that will carry us through the storm. Meditation will also reinforce our physical immunity, allowing our feelings of peace, safety, and calm to become more resilient. It can even support the repair and healing of our body's tissues and organs. With regular daily practice, over at least 6 weeks, the effects will be increasingly beneficial. Different parts of the meditation will serve us in different ways at different times. But we should always feel free to adapt whatever doesn't seem to suit us. So we continue to keep our attention on track in this way, lightly and gently, for a few more moments in silence, until we come to time for some loving-kindness meditation. So we continue to keep our mind gently on track, with the inner experience at the center of ourselves. And in the final moments of our practice, we can extend loving kindness and practice some affirmations. Affirmations are positive statements designed to be repeated or listened to as a sort of reprogramming of our unconscious mind to combat negative thinking. So we listen to this inner voice with a sense of relaxed attention, breathing in deeply with each set of words and repeating them softly to ourselves. So putting ourselves in the hands of the process, trusting in our heart that this is part of our healing, allowing us to see and feel the brightness emanating from our center with a sense of healing streaming through us from head to toe, clearing away unwanted debris, waking up every day with the motivation to distance ourselves from self-pity, dishonesty, or self-seeking motives, finishing up each day by congratulating ourselves on the emotions of craving, selfishness, dishonesty, or fear that we've managed to overcome. Trusting that every day we are getting stronger, clearer, and surer of who we are and what we are here for. And reflecting that now is the time to focus all our strength and resources to do what we need to do to overcome addiction safely, to work slowly towards this positive change, knowing we have the power and the love within our heart to break free from addiction and become our best possible self. In the final part of our meditation, we explore our ability to expand our awareness through loving kindness, like zooming out to take in a broader panorama, looking beyond ourselves to the whole room we're in, the building, or even further. We invite assistance from our friends and loved ones to support our efforts to recover and heal. We see ourselves surrounded by their love and care, feeling it throughout our body like a warm wave, and reflecting that we are encircled by invisible forces of love, beauty, strength, and forgiveness. So we extend loving kindness in this way with good wishes toward ourselves and those around us for the last few moments of our meditation together in silence. Sappa Putthanupavena, Sappa Dhammanupavena, Sappa Sanghānupavena Sattha Soti, Part 1 to 8. So if you'd like to come the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. And if you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So to pick up from where we left off, halfway through our old school tips and tricks and meditation, let's continue with our sixth piece of advice from our main teacher in Thailand. Whatever you may see or feel, just observe continuously in contentment, without analysis or expectation. So for some of us, it may seem obvious to just let the mind do its stuff or to trust it to do its own stuff. For others, this advice might be unexpected because there are some techniques of meditation where they give conflicting advice. What they say is that if something comes up in your meditation, you are supposed to either intentionally reject it or to label it as a way of standing back from it. For example, in some meditation practices, if you have a thought coming up, which ought to be bad enough in the first place, right? They teach you to say thinking to yourself as a way to label what's happening in your mind, in a way that you are no longer interested in the content of the thought. You're just labeling it and letting it go. But unfortunately for some people, on top of the interruption from the thought, they have now got disturbance from having to add the word thinking. So it's like adding insult to injury. So with Dhammakaya, we have a different approach to thoughts. Instead of labeling the thoughts or reacting, rejecting, categorizing, or analyzing them, we just try not to react to them at all, with the idea that if we leave them alone for long enough, they're going to go back to where they came from, and we'll achieve a standstill of the mind. So we're not going to let them stage a takeover of our mind. At the same time, we're not going to encourage them or get excited about them. And really the same goes not just for thoughts, but for everything that manifests in the mind. This sort of not attaching to things in the meditation comes down to being able to observe in a very impartial way, not getting involved. Some people use the technical word equanimity for this quality, so we are able to stand back from inner experience. We acknowledge it, but we don't go any further than that. We don't need to elaborate on them. As Martin Luther said, you cannot keep birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. And for us, the same applies to thoughts. Moving on to number 7, it is said we are the observers, not the ones running the show. So we're not the showrunner. We're not the producer, not the director, and definitely not the movie critic. We're just your regular viewers of the show. Some people like to take the metaphor further and say it's like we've got a view screen at the center of our body, and we're just a passive viewer of whatever is shown there. So whatever comes up, it's all good, even if it looks like complete nonsense. Even if it turns out it's exciting, and that's also good from the point of view of the meditator, and we just keep on observing. Even if it's boring at the beginning, eventually it will get to something interesting. Yeah. So, just the observers. But sometimes we're tempted to think, oh, it's supposed to be my mind and my experience, and like, I want to shape the process. But in fact, no. In terms of meditation, if it's going well, we are just able to stand back from it. It's another strange paradox of meditation, you might say. You'd think that you'd actually have to do more in meditation after going to all this trouble. But in fact, most of our effort has gone into setting it up to run on its own, so that we don't have to do anything anymore. So right there, you have another meditation paradox. Yeah. So moving on to number 8, inner experience is profound, but it can be attained only with ease. Again, this is a little bit counterintuitive, given that for most dramatic achievements in, let's say, the scientific world or the world of technology, you have to expend a great deal of effort, invest huge amounts of money, involve huge teams of people, and take years to complete it. You have to stay up all night to see it through. This is what you'd normally expect to achieve anything profound or even worthwhile. But in meditation is exactly the opposite. That the only way you get to the profound part is by doing it in a comfortable way, in a way that you feel contented with. So it's only when you feel a sense of ease that you've got a chance of actually getting there. Some have even said that successful meditation uses the same sort of effort as falling asleep. but I don't think that this is to be taken as literal advice. So no matter how spectacular your intentions may be, or even if you're tempted to make some grand gesture, what actually will make a difference is whether you are totally relaxed. In fact, other showy stuff might even be holding you back. It's only when you relax and just let it happen, then that's when it's really going to allow you to see something new in your meditation. So again, a paradox. Yeah. Some people try to look really eager and boast, oh yes, I'm going to endure untold pain in my meditation without flinching. And I'm going to really punish myself. And I'm going to go on hunger strike until I've attained something. But actually beating yourself up in that sort of way is not really going to work out well for you, because it's only when you're comfortable and the meditation happens on its own that the real process of meditation kicks in. So again, the advice is ironic but true. Be warned. Moving on to the 9th piece of advice, we are so used to complexity that we have to adapt, not to overthink this simple task. For our main teacher in Thailand, can you guess who his favorite students are? Yeah, it was the kids, because although they generally wouldn't be able to sit still for very long, the strange thing about kids is that they don't actually need to sit still for very long, because within 5 minutes or so they can already get all the attainments they need in the meditation. Yeah. The reason they can manage this is because they don't overthink things. So if they're told to sit down, close their eyes, and there's some brightness inside to be seen, then they agree, yes, of course. They don't know the meaning of the word skepticism. They just follow instructions without questioning it. They don't go, but someone else told me this or that, or I've never heard about that before, or that's counterintuitive, or oh, that's a cliche. But for adults, you get all of these opinions thrown back in your face. Grown-ups are so educated that, ironically, it becomes a hindrance to their meditation. So we have to go back to, I guess, what is widely known as our inner child, even though we're no longer children. But somewhere deep inside us, we've still got that elusive innocence, if we can just re-engage with it. Often we'd be better served just to get on with our meditation and not to think about it too much, and not to analyze what's going on too much. I often tell a story about a Swedish lady who joined one of our meditation retreats in Thailand. I understand that Sweden is quite a materially oriented country, but when she was trying to adapt to the conditions of a meditation retreat, she asked, normally when I'm at home, I have to worry about my family and my children. When I'm at work, I have to worry about my work tasks. So now that I'm here on my meditation retreat, what do you want me to worry about? So in turn, I asked her the rhetorical question, how about you try not to worry about anything during the retreat? And she said it sounded a bit suspicious to her, like the first time in her life that she had not had something to worry about. So yeah, meditation's a little bit different. You have to really trust things, yeah. To trust the process, trust that we are on the right track, at least to give the meditation a chance to do us some good, yeah. And last but not least, number 10 tells us, rest not from this noble task until inner wisdom is attained. So this doesn't exactly mean that we should meditate to the death. More accurately, it means to keep up the regular meditation habit. We shouldn't abandon meditation when it seems to be going badly, or when we're having a bad day. Because some people may think, today is not a good day for my meditation, so how about I just skip it for now? Or, I've got a lot on my plate at the moment, so maybe I don't need meditation as yet another thing to take up my time. Maybe I'll come back to it when I'm feeling more relaxed. But actually, consistency is really important. So not resting from the noble task doesn't mean that you have to do it all the time or give up your job in order to do it or whatever, but it means making time for a little bit of it every day, irrespective of whether it's a good day or a bad day, to keep going regardless. Some people assume that on a bad day, it would probably not make much of a difference whether they do meditation or not. But in fact, sometimes it's the opposite. Although you might not reach a spectacular attainment, but sometimes just making the attempt stops you from hitting rock bottom. because you have at least tried to settle your mind and bring your mind back to your center even when everything else is falling apart around you. Despite this, because you meditated, you have one small place of refuge in your mind which you can hold on to. Yeah. And actually, sometimes the fact that you've tried to meditate, even if you didn't get anywhere with it, but it's helped you on those particularly difficult days. It's place marked peace in your mind, so that on the days ahead, because you've maintained the habit in your life, you will still be able to progress in your meditation. So that's what it means by rest not from the noble task. So keep it going, pace yourself, of course. Some people go over the top and say, oh, I'm going to pull an all-nighter in my meditation, but they soon find themselves exhausted and in the end they despair. So it's better to ask yourself, what can I realistically fit into my life in a way that I can sustain the habit in a regular way, come rain or shine, where I can still manage to do a little bit of meditation every day and touch on that point of contentment in my meditation, which we know leads to good things, right? And from there, we can gradually build on that duration as the inclination takes us. But having this idea of meditating willingly or with a sense of free will and meditating because we want to helps progress come to us more easily if the habit is fairly regular. So that concludes our 10 old school tips and tricks for meditation, even if at times they have appeared paradoxical for our meditation progress. Nonetheless, we have time for a couple of questions, which owing to the format comes from those viewers who have sent them in advance. So the first question comes from Yesenia of Yorba Linda. So here comes the question. So, hi, this might be rather a random question, but I've noticed for quite a while now that the last names of the monks all seem to be weirdly similar, especially yours. I'm guessing you were not born with that name. So, if it's not too much trouble, can you explain how monks get their names, please? Hi, Yesenia. I guess this is one of those questions that everyone wants to ask, but nobody ever dares to. So, let's clear it up once and for all. So, in the Thai Buddhist tradition, when you become ordained as a monk, you get a new surname, but you get to keep your personal name. In some countries like Sri Lanka, you have to renounce all your former names completely, so both first and family names. And after that, you'd only get to use your new monastic name. But in Thailand, they do it differently, which is that they have you replace your surname, so your family name, with a given monastic name. In Sri Lanka, because monastic names tend to repeat themselves, they prefix it with the name of your place of birth. So for me, my monastic name is Thanissaro. Unfortunately for me, there's another more famous Thanissaro just down the road in San Diego. His original name was Geoffrey de Graaf. So according to Thai tradition, he'd be known as Phra Geoffrey Thanissaro, whereas I would be Phra Nicholas Thanissaro. So back in 1997, I gave up my family name. My family were not too happy about that. Being the only male offspring in the family, they pointed out, you know our family name will die out now. So they were not very happy about it and complained, you sound like an Indian now. But for the monastic ordination procedure, they have to mention your name in the chanting to nominate you as a monk. And because the chanting is done in Pali language, which is an Indic language, of course, the name has to fit in with all the grammar, right? So you can't have a name like Geoffrey or something, as it cannot be conjugated correctly in Pali during the chanting. Generally, the new name given to monks is supposed to reflect the qualities of heart which the new monk exemplifies, or maybe the ones which they should aspire to. So, Thanissaro, my name, starts with Tan, which means wealth or rank or work. The suffix isaro means the one who excels in something. So, putting the two parts together, my name means the one who excels in work or rank or wealth. On reflection, I think it mostly means that I have a lot of work. Yeah. So it's supposed to be an inspiring or blessed name. I think even in Christian tradition, monks and nuns get a new name at ordination too, because it helps you to make a clean break with your past or to turn over a fresh leaf in your life. So, the second question comes from Amy of Faircrest Heights. Your second quote talks about blind spots that hinder the mind from coming to a standstill. Could you please elaborate? So, Hi, Amy, and thanks for your question. So, talking about blind spots that hinder the mind from coming to a standstill, let's say that you have now discovered a space in your meditation where you can sometimes let the mind rest comfortably with no thoughts. So, the blind spots will be the things that sneak up on you to knock you out of that space. So, it might be the things that bring you back to your conventional thinking all over again, or cause your thinking to flare up all over again. So you might think, oh wow, I love this meditation. And then a whole train of other sneaky little thoughts hijack your meditation. So you now know to be more observant of those sneaky thoughts, which would otherwise be considered as your blind spots, or really anything that triggers your thoughts to start up all over again. So if you know they are blind spots, you simply ignore them. If you know what to look out for, then those blind spots are no longer blind spots. So for the sort of places where the sneaky thoughts come from, if you're more cautious of these, then it'll be easier to avoid getting caught up in them. It doesn't mean you have to fight off the thoughts from those blind spots, but it may mean that you are more careful about letting this sort of things push your buttons so easily. I guess the issue would be different from person to person. So today we've been looking at the old school tips and tricks for our meditation, some of which have been rather paradoxical, but I hope they are helpful for your meditation practice. For good measure, I'd like to remind viewers to keep the questions coming in about meditation or topics you've learned in the lecture to the email address that you can see spelled out in the slide. And I'll do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency, maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will manage to be better prepared in approaching your meditation, especially when coming across some of the more paradoxical aspects of the practice. So that's all for today. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe on YouTube below, and you'll be first to know when the new episodes drop, while making sure that I'm not fated to die in complete obscurity. For today, many thanks for viewing. So long, folks, and stay safe.